Thank you. In 1980, Becky and the kids and I moved to a town called El Cajon, California, which is about 30 miles east of San Diego on Interstate 8, if you're familiar with that at all. We moved there so I could attend Bible college. And the campus there was comprised of 3 different organizations. The church where Tim LaHaye was the pastor at the time, a college where I studied called, at the time, Christian Heritage College, now it's called San Diego Christian College, and a place called the Institute for Creation Research. And Becky got a job at the Institute for Creation Research as a secretary and eventually became the legal secretary there. And the 3 organizations were interrelated because the 3 people that were involved in founding the college had an impact on all 3 of those different organizations. So I received an education that had an emphasis in 2 specific theological disciplines. One was apologetics. If you've never heard that term, apologetics simply means a defense of the faith. And the other was on creation science. We live in a world today where evolution is considered by many, many, many people, and most people maybe even, to be fact. And yet, if you pay much attention to it, there are many varying theories concerning origins, and there's contention even among the various groups that believe in evolution. There is also, one of the things that I've learned through my studies is that there is no evolutionary fossil evidence that indicates a transition between species, only changes from within kind or within the same type of animal. So evolution is at its very best a theory, and it's a theory that requires a great deal of faith to make it viable. And I read recently in the past couple of years where even that is starting to break down because of the issues. Actually, because science and technology has increased so much, it's just difficult to explain evolution anymore. There are also a large number of scientists, and they come from every scientific discipline that hold to a different theory of origins, and of course that is the theory of creation. And these scientists are called creationists. And like evolutionists, they study the scientific evidence that is available, and from the same evidence they come to a radically different conclusion concerning beginnings. And having had the opportunity to study at a college under whom some of these scientific professors were teachers there, I, for me, came to the conclusion that while the creation model is still only theory, because who was there when it happened? Which one of us? Do you know anybody that was there when the world came into being? It is a tenable theory, though, and one that I accept. Like the evolutionists accept their theory by faith, I accept creation science by faith. And I could give you many examples of how both sides take the same evidence and how they reach different conclusions, but we'll leave that for another discussion, if you want to have it. In my last sermon, I began a 3-part sermon on Colossians chapter 1, 15 to 23. And today I want to focus only on verses 16 and 17, which read, "For by him," and the word him there is referring to Jesus, "for by him," listen to this carefully, "all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things," and once again he says, "all things were created by him and for him. He," Jesus, "is before all things, and in him all things hold together." Now, I think that most Christians believe that God created the heavens and the earth. But even among Christians, there is definitely a difference of opinion on how God did that. Some hold to the day-age theory, which ties in with evolution, saying that when in Genesis where it says, on day 1 God created this, and on day 2 God created that, and on day 3 God created something else, that rather than being a literal 24-hour day period there, that he was talking about an age, and it used the word day to define an age, which may have been thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of years. And that God then created the heavens and the earth through this process called evolution. And people who believe that way are called theistic evolutionists. How many of you have ever heard that term before? A couple of you. When I went off to Bible college, that's what I was, a theistic evolutionist, because I was raised in a public school that taught that evolution was how everything came into being. But I went to church, in a church that taught that God created everything. And so my little mind kind of put things together and said, God created everything, and he did it through this process called evolution. There are many creationists, however, that God's creative processes were done in 6 literal 24-hour periods, and on the 7th day rested. And they believe, and I have to say that I believe this too, and it boils down to how powerful your God is, for one thing. They believe that God could have just done this, and all could have been into existence. But he chose not to. He chose to do it in 6 days to provide an example. That's what the scriptures tell us, that for 6 days that we should work, and on the 7th day we should rest and honor God. It wasn't that he couldn't have done it like that. It's that he chose to give us an example for our lives. As we look at the subject this morning, I think one of the things that maybe we need to consider are 3 of the attributes of God which play into all of this and in this discussion of God's creative processes. So, and I'm sure you've heard these before, but I want to share with you real quickly again. The first one is the word omnipotent. How many have heard that word, omnipotent? The word omnipotent simply means all-powerful. Luke 1:37 and 18:27 tell us that nothing is impossible with God. How many of you believe that? Nothing is impossible with God. Okay, if you believe that, then why is it so difficult for you or I or anyone else to believe that God could have created the world in 6 literal days? If nothing is impossible with God, could he have done it that way? Could have, right? Instead of taking millions and millions of years and allowing animals and people to evolve over all that period of time, he could have done it like that, but he chose to do it in 6 days. Second, God is omniscient. The word omniscient simply means that he is all-knowing. Psalm 44:20 states, if we have forgotten the name of our God or spread out our hands to a foreign God, would not God have discovered it, since he knows the secrets of the heart? Ephesians 1:4, and we don't have time to go into that, but if you look at it sometime, it basically tells us that before the creation of the world, that God made this plan that through his Son, he would reconcile all things to himself. Read that sometime, Ephesians chapter 1, verse 4. He knew way in advance that man would fall into sin and be separated from God. And so he made this plan even before he created the world of how he would reconcile man back to himself. That's omniscience, to know that. And then the third thing is that God is omnipresent. It simply means that God is everywhere at one time. Is God here with us this morning?
Yes.
Is he down at First Baptist?
Yes.
Is he off someplace with people that don't even know him? Yes. God is at once everywhere. If God is eternal, let me ask you this, if God is eternal, and if God is the creator of all things, then God exists outside of time and space and matter, for those are his creation. Now that blows your mind, won't it? Trying to figure that out. But it's the fact that he's within creation, time, space, and matter, but he's also without it. Psalm 139, 7 and 8 says, where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you're there. If I made my bed in the depths, you are there. God is everywhere at once. And that's pretty hard to understand. How many of us can go and hide from God? How many of us can run away from God when we've done something wrong? You know, remember when you were a little kid, you did something wrong, and you go and hide and hope your parents wouldn't find you? God knows where you're at all the time. kind of a scary thought, really, sometimes, isn't it? Now, with that background established, let's look at verses 16 and 17 again. If you remember from my last sermon, Paul, as he's writing this letter to the Colossians, is writing in response to the teaching of the Gnostics, who taught that God could not have been directly involved in creation because God is spirit and creation is physical, and spirit and physical couldn't touch. Remember we talked about that a couple of weeks ago. So Paul combats that heresy with the claim that by him, referring to Jesus, all things were created, not through some distant emanation, but through Jesus Christ, all things were created. And here Paul infers several things about Jesus. First, he's eternal. John 1:1 says, in the beginning was the Word, and the literal translation of that is, in the beginning the Word already was. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So Jesus, as the Word, is eternal. And if he is the creator of all things, he would have had to exist before the creation, wouldn't he? Second, if Jesus existed before creation, and if he is the cause of creation, then Jesus is God. And then third, Jesus, as the Son of Mary, is God in the flesh. Those three things pretty well were a pretty good combat against the Gnostic philosophy of spirit is good and physical is bad. And for Paul presents Jesus as both spirit and as flesh. So Paul kind of knew what he was talking about when he was trying to fight this Gnostic theory. Notice also what it says that he created. He created things in heaven. What would that be? Spiritual or physical? It's okay. Y'all can be. He created things on earth. What would that be? Physical. All right. He created things that are visible. What would that be? Physical or spiritual? Visible, okay. And things that are invisible. Spiritual. And Paul, in essence, is saying that whatever you can point to, whether it be physical or spiritual, Jesus created. Not only were they created by him, but he goes on to say that they were created for him. Now think about that for a minute. If all things were created for him, what does that infer about our accountability to him? If we were created for Jesus and for his pleasure, are we accountable to him? Yes, we are. Man was created in the image and likeness of God. I think we've already talked about that. And he was created so he could be in relationship with God. Sin drove a wedge between God and man, and sin brought death into the world, affecting all of creation, not just our relationship with God, but it affected all of creation. And so God sent his Son Jesus to be an atonement for our sins on the cross. And like it or not, we are accountable to God, for we were created by him and for his purposes. Another objection that the Gnostics had that the Christian faced was the simplicity of the gospel. We talked about that a little bit a couple of weeks ago too. Remember, it said that only those who had a superior knowledge could come into relationship with God. But Jesus preached, you must receive the kingdom as what? As a child. Children don't have superior knowledge, do they? They have a very simple understanding. And you know what's really cool is they accept things by faith a whole lot easier than we do.